Good afternoon. It's Mrs. Woodbury. I'm deep inside the Three Sisters garden in my big garden at Woodbury Farm. Let me show it to you. And I realize now I switched portrait mode on my phone. So what we have here in the Three Sisters garden is corn. And this particular corn is popcorn. It's not terribly tall. And then we have beans, pole beans. These pole beans are Hidatsa shield beans. I got the seed from my mother. And as you can see, they are climbing up. This is the leaves of the bean right here. And that's the vines, the flowers that will become a bean. They are climbing up the corn, and they're almost as tall as the corn. Look at that. And if I go down lower, I see a little bean right there starting to develop. These are a dry bean, so it'll be a while before we can pick them. So I have the corn and the beans, and the third sister is the squash. This is Lakota squash I got from dioecious, and I'll walk out in a minute and show you some of the developing squash plants. What is the purpose of the Three Sisters garden? My research indicates that it has been practiced by Native American tribes all over the U.S., from the northeast corner to the southwest corner and pretty much everywhere in between. This garden is actually set up in more of the Zuni way, with the corn and the beans basically planted in the same hill instead of different hills like the Hidatsa did. But it is still a version of a Three Sisters garden. So the corn is a starchy kernel. It dries very well. It's high in energy. And so the corn grows. The beans are a nitrogen fixing crop. So they actually pull nitrogen from the air and fix it into the soil, which maybe not this season, but eventually the corn will be able to use. Corn is a high nitrogen crop. It needs a bunch of it. What does the squash do? The squash trails across the ground and acts as a living mulch. So all those big leaves are shading the ground. And when they shade the ground, they keep weeds from growing. If you look deep inside the squash patch, you'll see that where the leaves are shielding it, the weeds are small or not even really there at all. Whereas if we go and look at the rest of the corn patch, there are more and larger weeds. I weed, and so obviously I'm not letting them take over completely, but the shading does help, especially right here. We've got a lot of weeds. The shading does help with that. So this is my Three Sisters garden at my farm in Ross, North Dakota. And it is sort of a crossbred between the Zuni and the Hidatsa. And here is one of the developing Lakota squash right there. This is about as long as my hand right now. And these squash get to be a pretty nice size. They'll get to be green with a nice orange streak. Okay, we seem to have, there's another one. This one here, I can tell by the red ribbon. This one has been hand pollinated, and I put a ribbon on it. This is one that I will save seed from. This one here does not have the red ribbon, so I will not save seed from that because it may have crossbred with my squash at the other end of the garden. Now, what is up with that mess? I think we have a critter. I found also, and the male and female plants on this look very similar to the males and females in any other. Those are some males that I had pulled to hand pollinate a squash a few days ago. Okay, so here's some evidence of my critter. The dirt on that squash, this corn that is broken over, and over here we have a corn cob, a little developing corn cob that has been pulled off and munched on a little bit. So we'll have to keep a close eye on that, and if we have additional damage, then we might have to do something about it, set a trap or something, see if we can figure out what it is. All right, I'm gonna come out here to the edge of the garden. Oh, look at that. There's another one broken over. And I don't think that's from wind or anything else, because we really haven't had any that should affect this sturdy popcorn. Okay, I'm gonna come out here a little further, and I'm gonna talk about the parts of a corn plant. So here we have the leaf. This is the blade of the leaf right here. And coming out of these leaves is the tassel. The tassel is the male reproductive structure of corn. And so within this tassel, this is already kind of distributed its pollen already, I think. Within this tassel, it's really hard to see. You have to catch them at exactly the right time. You will see the stamens kind of, you know, coming out of these little things. These are already done. And you'll be able to see the actual pollen. I'm not seeing it on any of these. This one here, if I was to watch this one for a couple days, I'd probably be able to see it. This is an emerging tassel. That is the male part of a corn plant, okay? And a corn plant is like a squash plant where it is dioecious, meaning that it has separate male and female parts, but they are on the same plant. Where's the female? Right here, that's a developing cob of corn, and each of these is a silk. Each silk travels to a separate corn kernel within the plant. Hey, let's go back and get that little guy. He's not gonna make it, he's already dead. Let's see if we can show you what I mean. Okay, give me a second. What I'm doing while you look at the ground is I'm peeling this little cob of corn, and I'm gonna show you the silks. Some of them are broken off. Okay, 1 second. I took the husk off. You can see it there on the ground. And what I have here is the silks. Look at that. Look at that. You see how each silk is going to... I gotta take a picture of this. Hold on. Each silk is going to its very own kernel. Can you see that? Every single one, all the way around, has its very own silk. Look at that. There's hundreds of them in there. Now, so how does this get pollinated? By wind. The wind blows around the tassels, which are taller than the silks. The wind blows around the tassels, and the pollen falls off, kind of blows through the wind, and drops onto those silks. And you can't tell it yet, but if you ever get a cob of corn that's kind of half full, that's usually because there wasn't enough wind or there wasn't enough pollen moving around for some reason. One of the main reasons why that happens is if corn is planted in rows instead of in blocks. So if you look at the Three Sisters gardens, they're always in a square. They're a square. So I have 4 hills going this direction and 4 hills going that direction with the corn and beans, and then the squash is free to go amongst that. A lot of Three Sisters gardens will have squash planted at both ends, but I didn't need that much squash, so I didn't plant it at both ends. So, to review, the Three Sisters garden contains corn, beans, and squash. All 3 of them can be stored for winter use for months at a time. The Three Sisters garden is planted where each one has kind of a specific job and they work in harmony. It may not be the most efficient method of production as far as getting pounds per acre, but it does work. And I'm trying it just to kind of see how well it works in a North Dakota garden. I am watering these rows with a drip hose in addition to rain. That's that black and blue hose right there. Corn is a wind-pollinated plant, meaning that the wind blows the pollen around, and so it has to fall on each individual silk to get each individual kernel of corn. Corn is a dioecious plant, separate male and female parts on each plant. Squash is also a dioecious plant, separate male and female parts on each plant. And that is my Three Sisters garden in Ross, North Dakota.